Jerry Maguire is an interesting movie. It sits in the Hall of Fame pop culture zeitgeist just for its quotability alone.
Help me help you.
Larry, you better yell! Show me the money!
You know bees and dogs can smell fear?
You complete me.
You had me at hello.
Oscar nominated for Best Picture, Editing, Screenplay, and Actor, with it taking home supporting for Cuba. They don't make Oscar speeches like his anymore. Gooding Jr. Written and directed by Cameron Crowe, it follows the titular character, who is a recently fired 35-year-old sports agent, with one client to his name and an assistant who has admired him from afar. It's credited for increasing public awareness of the profession. In the early 90s, there were only a few sports management programs. A decade later, there were more than 100. I definitely noticed an uptick of young people becoming interested in the agent business after Jerry Maguire, said Andrew Brandon, executive director of the Morad Center for Study of Sports Law. A big movie that left a big impact. But if you ask people about it today, I think you get pretty mixed reactions. I'm not a fan of delineating movies by gender. Men can like chick flicks and women can like the broiest of films. On its surface, Jerry Maguire is a selfish, emotionally unavailable man with the attention of a 26-year-old single mom enamored by his potential. A rom-com drama, sports film, where that relationship takes a backseat to the one centering its two male leads. And one of its most memorable lines has, well, aged like milk, especially in the eyes of women. It's a boy movie. A good one, but a boy one nonetheless. So imagine my surprise watching it in its entirety for the first time and realizing my biggest takeaway wasn't about Jerry being this anti-hero or its, for lack of a better word, messy love story, or even Cuba's award-winning performance. No, my takeaway? Wow. Remember when society liked kids? What happened? Well, that's not a fair question. I mean, did society ever like kids? In 1975, psychiatrists Chester Pierce and Gail Allen coined the term childism to describe the oppression and prejudice against children. When Pierce was asked what allowed him to perceive and describe this type of discrimination, he answered, "Because I am a black person, and children are the most oppressed group." There's an automatic presumption of superiority any adult has over a child. Their needs, desires, hopes, fears, that takes precedence. Pierce and Allen initially saw this most in how children were depicted in television commercials. They were dirty. They whined for food. They set back family cooperation, and they were physical creatures, as opposed to thinking beings, and most commonly shown in a devalued way. You don't need me to explain how important media is in framing society's perception of things, but let's go back 20 years to when the landscape started to shift. Boston College professor Peter Gray detailed in his Substack series the gradual decline of kids' freedom starting in the 1950s. What happened, you ask? Well, perhaps 4 elements all working in conjunction with one another. First, no surprise to anyone, television brought kids indoors. Instead of hanging out after school, they now would run home to watch their favorite show before dinner. 2. Adult-directed sports began to displace kid-directed play. As someone born near the end of the silent generation, Gray remembers playing baseball or basketball organized by whatever kid showed up that day. Adults were never around, but by the 60s, Little League, Pee-wee hockey, biddy baseball became popular where grown-ups were now intruding into what had previously been seen as children's spaces. 3. Public space came to mean adult space. There was a time when kids were everywhere. They played in streets and lots, went to the movies, and without adults present. But over time, security guards began shooing them away. Police would be called, parents blamed, and city planners stopped taking them into account when planning public areas. 4. Conceptions of stranger danger led to a panic about kids' safety. Ultimately a result of more TVs that trickled down to the public space problem. As mentioned, children were already playing outdoors less, but in the late 70s, early 80s, child abduction and murder cases were highly publicized, sparking a widespread fear resulting in the media playing into the paranoia of parents. Kids were losing the independence they previously had, and spaces simply for them. If telling children what they need to do and making decisions on their behalf is a biological necessity, as Pearson Allen wrote, then what matters is how the decision is executed and how the child is afforded dignity and respect. In its totality, childism operates on three levels: the personal, systemic, and state. Personal factors in corrective violence, or the microaggressions, often lobbied against them. From an expectation they must be grateful to pushing your own defined goals, a la you must accomplish XYZ because I never was able to. Systemic is reflected in the origins and developmental concept of childhood, the exclusion of kids in public spaces or the reluctance adults have to hear them in matters that affect them. And on a state level, it's perceived through a political lens, an example being the lack of adequate protection, often from abusive parenting. In broad terms, there's never been a time children were growing up in this utopia of a society that valued them. Children should be seen, not heard, is believed to have been coined by clergyman John Merck more than 600 years ago. But as we've ebbed and flowed through different eras, media has been able to represent a snapshot of the way generations felt about their own childhood. Let me introduce you to my friend the 90s. Here, boomers and Gen X started sharing space in media. Big budget mainstream movies were still dominated by the former, while Gen X broke through in the independent circuit. In comparison to gens that followed, boomers lived a childhood in a more stable, optimistic post-World War II society. Their films were nostalgic in nature, longing for a simpler time, reflecting a desire for fantasy and escapism. When they presented stories centered around family, you notice a hidden dysfunctional through line. As boomers grew up experiencing more traditional family units, behind closed doors were emotionally distant parents that ruled with an iron fist. They grew up in homes defined by structure and order, but also promises leading to optimism that shifted with major cultural events in young adulthood, resulting in films that explored a loss of innocence. Boomers, well, let me be more clear, white boomers grew up in a bit of a rose-colored world that was cracked open as adults. But even black boomers had more of an optimism found within their hope and trust of institutions that black Gen Xers did not. They didn't just inherit the blow-up of a new reality, they normalized it. Divorce became common, with more Gen Xers growing up in a single-parent or blended family household. As women entering the workforce increased, children were left alone more often than boomers, coining the term latchkey kids, trickling down into them actually being more independent and emotionally self-reliant. Growing up in a time of uncertainty, and in the shadow of the civil rights movement came Reaganomics, the war on drugs, mass incarceration. A through line transcended race, where this generation as a whole held cynicism and disillusionment for the institutions that boomers had a level of faith in, at least during their own childhood. Reflected in their films is the rejection of corporate and consumer culture. They questioned authority and rejected traditional values. If black boomers utilized their activism through the church, marches, and politics, Gen X did so through art, media, and the rise of hip-hop in a more grassroots, decentralized way. With this also came a healthy sense of dark humor and irony. You can see in certain films at the time. This acted as a method of survival and a way to cope with the world the previous gen didn't have to experience, at least until they were older. While Gen X films in the 90s represented their feelings as young adults, it wouldn't be until the 2000s where we saw more reflections of their own childhood in their work. The perfect picture glass had been shattered, and the rise of certain filmmakers had put a mirror up to that reality. One boomer, and I'm sure there are others, but for the focus of this video, one boomer found a way to blend these differing outlooks seamlessly. Let's talk about it. Born in 57, Cameron Crowe sits right in the middle of that generation, still managing to always write his characters with a level of compassion. And I say still manage because boomers aren't known for their glowing empathy. Jerry Maguire examines the cynical nature of a world Crowe was seeing in his adulthood, while pushing for warmth and authenticity found in youth before innocence is stripped away. 3 kids show up in the film, first being Jesse, the son of one of Jerry's clients who is in the hospital recovering from his 4th concussion. After asking for help to get his dad to stop, rather than showing kindness, empathy, actually hearing him, Jerry is nice, to flash a phony smile and brush off his concerns, leading Jesse to say 2 words enough to jumpstart a morality crisis and character arc to fill up 2 hours of a runtime.
Fuck you.
It's his only appearance, but it's enough. Jerry stays up all night writing a mission statement, rejecting his company's dishonest culture that sees his players as numbers instead of people. His suggestion? Less clients to foster a more personal relationship with their athletes. A kid saying right through the facade of bullshit is what woke him up. But habits are hard to break, which we'll get into when we talk about the star. Second up is Tyson, Rod and Marcy's little boy, who plays no significant role in Jerry's arc, but one in the portrayal of a healthy, loving black family. We meet him with his mom, played by the beautiful Regina King, who really doesn't get her flowers for this performance. She demands Jerry to do his job, showing us she's more than just some ignorant housewife. She knows the business and refuses to be passive in Rod's career. As this convo is happening, Tyson is in the back, throwing things around, matching his mom's energy, unabashedly taking up space. He's not in an environment where he's forced to grow up fast, or assisting in any adult's arc. No, in this film, Tyson gets the luxury to just be. His presence supports his parents, and they allow his lively spirit to flourish. Within reason. Rod and Marcy's marriage is platformed as the love everyone should be aspiring to.
I'm not saying that it didn't exist, but I hadn't really, until that role, felt like I had seen a black couple on TV or in the films that were together and they were fun, and then they seemed like that's the couple that, if anyone knows Marcy and Rod, they're inviting them to the party. And that's what they felt like to me.
And a black child being the product of that, getting to authentically exist is a simple detail, easy to miss, but I found nice to see. Last is Ray, the son of Dorothy, played by Renee Zellweger, who arguably has the most important role, representing the sincerity of real connection Jerry is desperately trying to obtain throughout. It would have been easy for Ray's presence to simply exist in the film for communal awws, and that's there, but he's more than that, making for a unique child character, especially around this time. With adult-centered stories, there was a tendency, and honestly still is sometimes, to portray kids as these symbols for innocence being lost. And one way to do that was by making them almost these mini adults, for whatever reason that served the plot. Showing them as wise for their age in a way that outcasted them into these stories where they would form a bond with an adult. But Jerry Maguire subverts this because Ray acts like a kid, he speaks like a kid, and the emotional connection Jerry fosters with him isn't from a place of equal footing. He's clever, but not in a way that feels written by an adult. Grounding the story through childlike openness and wonder, Ray simply being himself, a kid that spouts off trivia facts and who wants to go to the zoo, is the catalyst for our protagonist's growth. There's a tug and pull battle going on internally. One side is Jerry wanting to go back to his old self, feeling it would be easier. The other is him realizing these connections are worth it. Not out of an obligation of loyalty, but connecting to the most sincere, almost childlike version of himself. By the end, he's in that living room because he wants to be. Which is one of my gripes for why the "you complete me" line doesn't really work. But this video is not about the romance, so I'll let that go. Where was I?
You guys, I don't care where I am. The second that I hear a baby crying, the vibe has already just been like lowered to trash. You know what I mean? Like, you know how in every time in movies when they're trying to represent a chaotic situation or something that's just like not glamorous and not chic, there's always like an old person coughing and a baby crying. Like that.
Ew, look, they're having a little league game. Can you imagine spending every Saturday of your life watching a bunch of fetuses suck at baseball? I could never.
I said that I do not like kids. I don't. And you know what? I'm allowed to not really like kids. I never said I hate them. I never said I don't want them to exist. I'm just saying I don't really like them. I don't want them. I don't really like them. And you were a kid once too. Yeah, but I'm not anymore, and I was also probably fucking annoying. I probably wouldn't have liked myself either.
The reason why Gen Z hates children so much is because a lot of us were raised with parents that didn't actually want us.
Now, if you find kids annoying, valid, like they can do some pretty crazy shit. But when you actually get down to it, like when you understand why people find kids annoying and what behaviors they find kids annoying, it's age-appropriate behavior. And it's things that we were told when we were young to not do, even though, once again, it was age-appropriate behavior. The parentification or adultification of kids is wild. And I've been thinking about it a lot when people say, oh, you're so mature for your age. That's not a compliment.
And like, I don't like kids. I don't like them. I find them annoying. I find them gross. I find them overstimulating.
In capitalist society, where individual value is fundamentally tied to your output and productivity, children are seen as nothing more than an inconvenience.
Irrational. We are in a tin can with a baby in a goddamn echo chamber, and you want to talk to me about okay, because you're yelling. So is the baby. Okay, so you're a man. Did that mother ask to yell? Okay. No.
I just want to know how people continuously justify hating a group of people who haven't even been around long enough to have a strong sense of self. They're learning how to read, how to write, how to maneuver in the world. Every single thing that they feel, they're feeling for the first time.
Oh yeah, hating kids. See, we're in a time where it's become a hell of a lot more socially acceptable to express one's disdain for them, at least in America. A war on social media has been enacted, where child-free people and parents are going head-to-head, both being accused of perpetuating the problem. And not to both sides of the conversation, but both sides. We have child-free women who push past the patriarchal restraints of their value only existing in being tied to a man and popping out babies. And while this can create someone who pours into their community, it can also go overboard in them developing resentment. But parents aren't off the hook either. As one of those creators acknowledged, having kids doesn't mean you like them. Wanting your own dreams and legacy to be fulfilled by vulnerable individuals that didn't ask to be here. If we're gonna talk about it, look in the mirror. Earlier, I went over the building blocks starting from the 50s that got us to where we are now. But to state it plainly, the root of all of this is white American individualism, shaped by the nuclear family structure, which consists of a father, mother, and children all living under one roof. Initially, it could be easy to say, well, what's so wrong with that? Which is by design, stay woke. The problem is it aids you into isolating from your own community. Single parent, blended, queer, extended family structures are all excluded from this makeup. Rather than raising children in a communal environment where you know your neighbors, they have relationships with their aunts or uncles or your friends or their cousins, where sharing and support is the norm, nuclear families, which also aids in capitalism, incentivizes you to silo into your own individual household and compete for concentrated wealth, keeping up with the Joneses, so to speak. We have a manifestation of the problem when parents chant how child-free people do not have a place in discourse about literally the next generation. This fuels individualism, trickling down into a society that scoffs at the idea of communal effort, with no sense of responsibility for the kids in it unless you gave birth to them. Dorothy is a widow, making her a single mom living under a roof with her sister, who frequently hosts a divorced women's group. We're also introduced to their eccentric, jazz-loving nanny, Chad. Oftentimes, Rod and Marcy are seen around other family members. When he talks about making it big for his family, there's no separation from his immediate and extended. Tyson sees his uncle just as much as he sees his dad, if not more. To keep it short and sweet, Ray and Tyson are being raised in communities that like them. Now, I can't say if everything I'm outlining was intentional, but watching Jerry Maguire almost 30 years later, it truly acts as a time capsule in the best way. And maybe not even a true one of how the 90s actually was. I mean, I was just a baby myself. But more so a peek into the optimism that lived in boomers once. Jerry's whole mission statement ended in him getting fired because he dared to express a desire for human connection over monetary gain. an epiphany brought on by the brutal, honest words of a 10-year-old. I think Crow did something really special with this one, where kids are shown to be of value, not by fulfilling some dream or doing the emotional labor for a grown-up, but just by being kids. And as Pierce and Allen wrote, I think it afforded them with dignity and respect.